It's a question that has puzzled allies and rivals alike for over a century. Why does the United States fight everywhere? From the jungles of Vietnam to the deserts of Iraq, from the mountains of Afghanistan to the skies over Libya and Serbia, America's military seems to be everywhere at once. No other nation in history has deployed its power across the world on such a scale for so long. But how did it begin? And what does it say about the American way of war? To understand, we need to go back, not just to the 20th century, but to the very birth of the nation. Because the roots of America's global wars lie deep in its earliest battles, not on foreign soil, but on the frontier. When the United States was born in 1776, it was a small collection of states hugging the Atlantic coast. Its leaders believed in liberty, self-determination, and independence. But alongside that idealism was something else, an unshakable belief in expansion. The early American wars weren't fought overseas, they were fought westward. Against native nations, against Britain, against Mexico. Each conflict pushed the borders further, extending the reach of the Republic across the continent. In many ways, America's first foreign policy was the conquest of its own continent. And from that emerged an attitude that security and freedom could only be guaranteed by constant expansion and preemptive strength. The wars of the frontier taught America that survival meant taking the initiative. It was a lesson the young republic would never forget. By the mid-19th century, that frontier spirit had evolved into something larger, manifest destiny. Americans saw themselves as chosen to spread democracy and civilization, but this belief, while cloaked in idealism, also justified conquest. The war with Mexico in 1846 gave the U.S. vast territories, California, New Mexico, Texas, and confirmed its rise as a continental power. Yet this war also revealed a pattern that would echo through American history. Limited objectives turning into larger commitments, and the idea that spreading freedom often came through force. Then came the Civil War, the bloodiest conflict in U.S. history. It was a war not of conquest, but of definition what kind of nation America would be. The North's victory created a new sense of purpose. The United States was indivisible, powerful, and now armed with industrial might. The war transformed the U.S. military into a modern force. When peace returned, the country looked outward, to the Pacific, to Latin America, to the world. By the late 19th century, the United States had outgrown isolation. Its economy was booming. Its industries needed markets. And its navy, guided by thinkers like Alfred Thayer Mahan, sought global reach. Mahan argued that great nations controlled the seas. His ideas inspired the building of a powerful American fleet, capable of projecting power anywhere. And soon it would. In 1898, the Spanish-American War marked America's arrival as a global power. It was brief, just a few months, but its consequences were enormous. In the name of liberating Cuba from Spain, the U.S. destroyed the Spanish Empire and took control of territories from the Caribbean to the Pacific, Puerto Rico, Guam, the Philippines. For the first time, the United States had overseas colonies. It was the dawn of the American century. Yet it also set a precedent. Wars framed as missions of liberation often ended with occupation. The Philippines insurgency that followed the war was America's first major counterinsurgency campaign. Villages burned, guerrilla wars dragged on, and American soldiers learned a grim lesson, that controlling territory was far harder than taking it. Then came the 20th century, and with it, the age of world wars. In 1917, after years of neutrality, the U.S. entered World War I. President Woodrow Wilson declared it was a war to make the world safe for democracy. And though the U.S. tipped the balance toward Allied victory, it emerged disillusioned. The trenches of Europe had claimed millions of lives. America withdrew again, hoping to stay out of foreign entanglements. But history had other plans. 2 decades later, a new threat rose: Nazi Germany, Imperial Japan, Fascist Italy. The world once again descended into chaos, and the U.S. could no longer stay isolated. The attack on Pearl Harbor in 1941 made that decision for them. World War II was unlike anything before it. For the United States, it was total war. The nation mobilized on an industrial scale, producing tanks, planes, and ships in numbers no enemy could match. Soldiers fought across Europe, Africa, and the Pacific. The war ended with a terrifying new weapon, the atomic bomb, and America's victory placed it at the pinnacle of global power. But victory brought a new kind of conflict. 1. Without clear battlefields or declarations of war. The Cold War transformed the American way of fighting. No longer about conquest, now it was about containment. The Soviet Union and its allies sought to expand communism. The US pledged to stop it, anywhere at any cost, and so began an era of interventions, proxy wars, and ideological struggle. Korea in the 1950s, a brutal, frozen war that ended in stalemate but defined a pattern. Limited war to achieve global balance. Then Vietnam, a nightmare of jungle warfare, insurgency, and political quagmire. America deployed 500,000 troops, believing superior firepower would ensure victory. It didn't. The enemy fought a different kind of war, patient, decentralized, and relentless. When US forces withdrew, the world saw that American might had limits. Yet the lesson wasn't that America should retreat, only that it needed to adapt. After Vietnam, the US military restructured itself, developing doctrines of high mobility, precision, and overwhelming technological superiority. These ideas would define the modern American way of war. The 1991 Gulf War was the proof. When Iraq invaded Kuwait, the US led a vast coalition to drive it back. The campaign was swift and decisive. Smart bombs, stealth aircraft, satellite coordination. It was televised, surgical, and almost bloodless by the standards of previous wars. The world watched in awe. American power seemed unstoppable, but the wars that followed would tell a different story. In Afghanistan and Iraq after 2001, the US once again found itself not just fighting armies, but nations, identities, and ideas. The enemies were not superpowers, but insurgents, fighters without uniforms fading into civilian populations. The US military could win every battle, yet struggle to win peace. This paradox lies at the heart of the American way of war. From the frontier to Fallujah, America has relied on overwhelming force, advanced technology, and moral purpose, yet has often been drawn into wars with no clear ending. The strength that enables victory also makes it difficult to disengage. Once the machinery of war is set in motion, politics and ideals intertwine in ways even presidents can't fully control. America fights everywhere because it sees security everywhere at stake. The oceans, once barriers, are now highways for threats. The digital age has made borders meaningless. A terrorist plot, a regional conflict, a cyber attack, all seem to demand global vigilance. And behind that vigilance lies a belief that American leadership ensures global stability. Critics call it overreach. Supporters call it responsibility. But it's more than either. It's the product of history, geography, and identity. America is a continental power with global ambitions, a republic with an empire's reach. Every generation inherits not only its ideals but its fears. The fear of another Pearl Harbor, another 9/11, another rival rising unchecked. That's why even as the world changes, the American way of war endures. The tools evolve, drones, cyber operations, special forces, but the logic remains the same. Act first, act fast, and act globally. Wars are no longer declared in Congress. They unfold in real time in distant places with allies, proxies, and precision strikes. And yet behind all this power lies a contradiction. For a nation that values peace and liberty, America has been at war for most of its existence. From 1776 to today, there have been only a handful of years when US forces weren't engaged somewhere in the world. The reasons vary: ideology, economics, alliances, deterrence. But the pattern remains. So why does America fight everywhere? Because in its own eyes it must. Because its global presence is seen not as conquest but as protection of trade routes, of allies, of a world order built in its image. Whether that order is sustainable is another question. In the 21st century, new powers are rising. China, Russia, regional coalitions, and the idea of unchallenged American dominance is fading. But the habits of history run deep. Even in an era of drones and diplomacy, the instinct to intervene remains. From Eastern Europe to the South China Sea, the old logic still echoes. If America doesn't act, who will? The American way of war, then, is not just about how America fights, and it's about why it fights. It's a blend of idealism and realism, security and ambition, fear and faith in its own mission. Sometimes it brings peace, sometimes chaos, but always it reveals something profound about the nation itself, that for America, The line between defending freedom and defining it has always been blurred, and so, as new challenges emerge, cyber warfare, artificial intelligence, shifting alliances, the question remains not whether America will fight again, but where and why. The story of American war is not only a chronicle of battles and victories, but of a nation constantly testing the limits of its power and its purpose. The world watches, as it has for a century, wondering the same thing. Can a country that fights everywhere ever truly find peace? Because in the end, the American way of war is not just a strategy, it's a reflection of who America is and who it believes it must be to survive.